All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Again, this will be recorded with the slides available for everyone who has attended or maybe those who registered and missed. Got Sarita already sharing her screen, so we'll go ahead and jump in here and get started. All right. Now, this webinar today is all about continuous discovery, a really hot research method in the UX industry. And we got some experts on continuous discovery here, some of our guest speakers that have themselves implemented this research strategy. So we're really excited to break it down, share with you some best practices on how to employ this research methodology in your own research practice. So let's go ahead and introduce our guest speakers for today. Susan, our first guest speaker, we're so excited to have her on. Susan is a senior UX research manager at Sage, heading up the user research team on the performance marketing function. And Susan has been at Sage for about 4 years now and has since tripled the size of her research team. So she's had a lot of success over there. The team delivers actionable, impactful insights to the business, influencing the strategy and fueling tactical initiatives across the global Sage team. And then prior to Sage, Susan was the head of design research in a multidisciplinary design team at Virgin Money. Susan, thank you so much for giving your time for us today.
Very happy to be here. Thanks, Nate.
Amazing. We also have my good friend, Dr. Kyle Gibson, who is an anthropologist and freelance principal UX researcher, formerly at both Meta and 1-800-Flowers, where he conducted generative and evaluative research using mixed methods. And he focuses on helping people to strengthen their relationships through gifting, altruism, and exchange. And I can personally say has a great recommendation for New York restaurants. Kyle, thanks so much for joining as well.
Thanks, Nate. Good to see you.
Awesome. And then lastly, we have Userlytics' own Sarita. Sarita is a principal UX researcher consultant here at Userlytics with a background in psychology, sociocultural studies, and market research. She speaks a few different languages, Spanish, English, and French, which helps her understand different user experiences and different cultures. And at Userlytics, Sarita also uses various methods, plus is also keen to share her knowledge in UX research in conference talks, consulting calls, and webinars just like this. Sarita, also thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Nate.
Awesome. And lastly, there's me, head of channel development here at Userlytics, again, host with the most on today's webinar. But let's go ahead and kick things off. All right, now we want to do a quick poll first, just to get everyone interacting and kind of comfortable. So we'll go ahead and get the first poll going here. So all of the attendees today, go ahead and we want to know, how often do you personally talk to your customers? Do you maybe never get the chance to? Is it pretty infrequent, only a couple times per year? Or maybe you're a daily talker? Looks like we have some results rolling in, and we'll be sharing those shortly. Want to give everyone a chance to answer those first. But again, as we'll learn today, continuous discovery is all about a frequent, consistent cadence of speaking with customers. And again, we'll break all that down, but let's give it just a few more seconds for everyone to add their answer in. And I will go ahead and end it in 3, 2, 1, and let's see how the results fared. Looks like a little bit of a mixed bag, but most popular would be about every quarter. Kyle, Susan, actually interested to hear yours. I know that you didn't have a chance to answer in the poll, but also interested in kind of how often you guys are talking to your clients.
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. So I have a team of 5 user researchers, and typically we aim to deliver at least 1 study per month. So if you times that against 5, so that's five times a month. But within those studies, we'll be speaking to anywhere from between 6 and maybe 50 people. So we do engage with users quite often as part of our work.
And then I'll be talking about kind of 2 different channels of continuous discovery that I take part in. And one is my own work where I am talking with people, hopefully weekly, usually a couple people a week, I would hope. And those can be internal users, external, wherever. And then also leading what I call a listening lab, which is a small d democratization of research at the company a bit, which is where I have product owners talk with people, which is sometimes terrifying, but I think terrifying for them. But we've got some processes to make it easier. And that happens every 2 weeks. They'll talk with one person, and I'll talk later too about how we generalize that further.
Yeah, amazing. Very excited to hear about that, Kyle. Want to make a quick note before we kind of jump in here. So again, we have the chat, so feel free to connect with each other in the chat during the webinar. We also have a QA. If you have questions, we're going to be doing QA at the end, so you'll be able to ask your questions to our guest speakers. And love the QA. I think that's a really interesting part to kind of hear from them on the fly with the different questions you have. And then Sarita, also interested to kind of hear from you on what you would have put in the poll, and then I'll kind of pass the slides over to you.
Definitely. Well, for me, I would say weekly because this is what we're going to be talking about this in this webinar. But the more, the merrier. I think that's what I would summarize it. As more as you know your customer, you know their pain points, their desires, their needs, the more you're going to give them the experience that they really, really want, and that will eventually engage them most with your brand. Great. So thank you, Nate, for that very exciting poll. And thank you, Susan and Kyle, for joining me in this very exciting webinar. To start, even though I would not consider myself a continuous discovery expert, I did want to give you a brief overview of the continuous discovery framework based on Teresa Torres' book, Continuous Discovery Habits, so that you in the audience that have not yet read the book or that are not familiar with this framework can be put into context of what we are going to be talking about today and why precisely we ask you about your frequency of your conversations with your customers. But actually, to understand the continuous discovery, I think that it is most important to go a little bit back and define what discovery is. And this is very important because probably most of our audience today work in a product team, so you are aware of its definition, but maybe can also be researchers or have many other different roles. So it is important to understand what product discovery is as a part of the product development lifecycle, because this is where the continuous discovery framework should be applied. And Tim Herbig, product management coach, author, and speaker, defines discovery as a process of reducing uncertainty around a problem or idea to make sure that the right product gets built for the right audience. And this definition is really interesting, but it leaves us with a lot of questions. How do we reduce that uncertainty? How do we make sure that we are building the right product? What is the right product? And this is where the continuous discovery framework comes in. So the book of continuous discovery habit proposes this structure that we're seeing on the screen called the opportunity tree, which is like a step-by-step guide to help product teams organize their discovery time and efforts, answering those questions that I just mentioned and many more, but specifically to avoid making any wrong decisions and wasting time and resources on that. So yes, this framework talks about research, but it does provides other activities that the product team should do. And the research that is done in this framework comes way before the usability testing that you're accustomed to do in the Userlytics platform. This research is done to make strategic decisions, for taking those decisions before deciding, before building or testing anything. The framework actually indicates that there's the need to engage with the customer throughout the discovery phase before actually starting to build or test any kind of thing. So from the beginning, where you're trying to tackle that initial question or that initial problem of deciding what to build or if to build something, all the way until trying out different solutions before creating any type of prototype. The first step in this process, as we can see here, is defining your desired outcome. The outcome should be established by the product trio, which the book explains that is the combination of the product management, the product designer, and the developer. The three of them should work together in defining this desired outcome and should be focused not only in what the team needs to do and deliver, but on the impact and the value that their actions will have on the company and their customers, on what change it will create on both the business metrics and the user behavior. So instead of telling product teams what to build, the outcome-driven companies empower their product teams with autonomy and trusting them to find their own direction. So rather than assigning a fixed list of features that they have to complete by an exact date or having them write code without any type of purpose, these teams are challenged to solve real customer issues or meet meaningful business goals. And because of this, a desired outcome has to be framed in a customer-centric way. So rather than giving the team an output of release a referral program, the output should be drive user acquisition through word of mouth. Additionally, it is important to tackle one outcome at a time, because as you saw on the opportunity tree, working out an outcome requires several activities, and this needs focus. So you need to work on one at a time. That first activity is finding what are the opportunities of that outcome that you decided upon. And this is actually the most important space for research itself, because this is where you need to explore what are the customer needs, their desires, and their pain points. And it is divided into different parts. First of all, it is necessary to map out everything you know or you think you know about your customers. And then you can refine that map and change things as you learn more about them. But how do we do this? Precisely by doing customer interviewing. The framework indicates that is precisely the product trio that should talk to the customers at least once a week. Therefore, my answer before. And this is because the opportunity tree should be fed constantly, so that precisely you can modify things and start changing things and seeing what are the opportunity that is really coming up along the way. This interview should not be something very long or structured. It is not like a moderated test that we run for you, for example. These are more of conversation, more informal conversations that the product team member has with a customer or a potential customer based on one or two questions that they need to answer or that they're exploring that exact week about a specific need or a point that they're trying to explore or to validate. This should become then something automatic, something that is part of the weekly team routine. However, as we all know in research, the most important part, but also the most hard part, is to actually recruit the users. So this is why Userlytics comes in and offers you the service to recruit with our proprietary panel and program those interviews so that you always have those users waiting for you to talk. And therefore, how the book says, it then becomes easier to interview than not to interview. But we'll talk about more that in detail at the end of the webinar. Some of the tips that the book gives about conducting these interviews include differentiating your research questions from your interview questions. Do not ask the customer what are their pain points with your product or what do they want the product to offer, because this is actually going to give them a wrong idea. Ask them about their last experience using a specific feature of your product or purchasing your product or a similar one if they're a potential customer still. It has been studied by neuropsychology that when you're asked a hypothetical question, our left brain kinds of invents an answer of how they think they should do something or what would they imagine that they would do or that they should be doing, instead of saying how or what they would actually do. So it is recommended to ask customers about an experience rather than how would they do it in the future, so that you can learn what they would in fact do and not what they might rationalize that they would ideally do. And then you can start digging deeper from there on what happened before and after that, who were they with, and what challenges they faced and what did they do to resolve them. Additionally, you must not get ahead on the opportunity tree steps. Ask them about their needs and pain points, not yet on the solutions that I do know that everyone already has in mind on how to solve those desired needs and pain points. If they do propose a solution, turn it around and ask them, why would this be helpful for you? What would that do for you? So that you can discover the underlying need, the underlying pain point, and the actual opportunity that you're trying to look for. This framework also offers an interview snapshot that we can see on our screens, suggesting that the product trio member summarize and synthesize the most important information gathered throughout the conversation, and that they can present them to the rest of the team and update their opportunity tree. However, not all of the opportunities should go on the tree. Only those that really show a customer need, desire, or pain point, that are frequently in customer conversations, and that really drive that desired outcome that you have set. Also, and most importantly, they should not be solutions. This can be distinguished by asking, for example, the question, is there more than one way to solve this opportunity? If there is, it is actually an opportunity. If it's not, if it has only one solution, then it is actually the solution. And this is precisely because the next step is committing to one of those opportunities and looking for the multiple solutions that it could have. For this, it is necessary to ideate individually first, focusing on creating as many ideas, as many solutions as possible. And then as a team, you can evaluate those solutions and choose 3 of them. You can use, for example, voting. And the important thing is that at the end, you get 3, even if it requires multiple rounds. Then the team should identify the hidden assumptions of that action, of that solution. And this can be done, for example, by doing a story map, conducting a pre-mortem, or actually walking backwards on your opportunity tree to see if, for example, customers really want this solution, or if there is any potential harm in carrying this solution out. We then come again to the research in the experimental space, where the assumptions are mapped on this grid that we can see here, based on how important on the success of the idea is each of those assumptions, and how much evidence you have to confirm or not confirm it. And then you should test those assumptions that are critical for the solution, but that you know little about. This should be done in quick over-the-night tests or surveys that you can collect very fast evidence. This is not to decide if you go with the idea or not. It is to evaluate different ideas, and then you can decide. This is actually the last step of the framework. So as I mentioned, it is a quick overview of it, but just to give you those main concepts that we're going to be talking with Susan and Kyle, and to get an idea of that process that the framework proposed. Also, it is important to say that this is not a linear process nor a simple process, because you can then explore different solutions, different opportunities, and different outcomes. So as the name suggests, it is a continuous process. I like to finish precisely with the definition that the book gives of the continuous discovery, to conclude with an overall message that the framework leaves, or at least to us. And it is that throughout the different opportunity tree spaces, or steps we could call them, constant contact with your customer, doing small research activities by the research team, is vital in order to reach your outcome and also to take those strategic decisions. So the next part of our webinar is precisely talking to our clients that are actually implementing this framework, so that they can share their experience, their challenges, the different learnings that they have of actually implementing this into their teams. But I do think, Nate, that you have another poll coming in.
Yeah, wonderful. Let's go ahead and kick that one off. I'll go ahead and launch it now. Just want to say a huge thank you to Sarita. I found that super valuable. I love the insights you have and kind of just breaking it down for us. But we want to hear from everyone on this next poll. What is your biggest challenge in product development right now, right? So kind of understanding what are some of the challenges that you and your team might be facing as we kind of digest the learnings that we just got from Sarita. So I'm super excited to hear from both Susan and Kyle next. But we'll give everyone a few more seconds to fill out their poll here, and then we'll hear kind of what are some of the challenges that people are facing. As we're waiting, I also want to mention that we do have the QA open, and the QA will happen at the end of the webinar. So if you have a question about maybe something Sarita covered, or you want to ask Susan and Kyle kind of a direct question about how they're implementing this practice, please throw that in the QA, and we will definitely get those towards the end. I see a good question there already. All right, now let me go ahead and end the poll here in 3, 2, 1, and let's see what everyone said. So it looks like, again, a good mixed bag. Looks like at the top, balancing speed with quality. And so I actually love that answer because I think that is a challenge that continuous discovery kind of addresses itself. Sarita, would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think that precisely the fact that you are doing the continuous is it's going to take off the pressure of going fast, but you are going fast because you're gathering information as you go every single day.
Amazing. Susan, Kyle, wondering if any of these stick out to you, or maybe if there's a different challenge that your team faces in kind of the product development stage.
I think balancing speed with quality is always going to be on the list. It's real world research, so that comes. But Sarita, you're absolutely right. You're going to be doing this so often that you have a huge backlog of qualitative information that you can pull from at any time, and so you can say, uh, I remember when we were interviewing this person 6 months ago, they mentioned this. And if you've got 30 or 40 interviews that you can go back to, you have real data that you can always pull from and have insights that are much better than, staring into the abyss.
Yeah, for me, definitely it's all of the above, but balancing speed with quality is definitely one of the ones that stands out to me as well. And also how we use the kind of user research insights to help prioritize features that also marry up with the business goals as well. So that's always quite an interesting one.
All righty. Well, I appreciate that. Let me go ahead and give this back to you, Sarita.
Great, thank you, Nate. Well, these results are very interesting. Give us actually a very good starting point to talk to our guests today. Once again, Susan, Cal, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experiences with all of our audience today. So to follow up on our poll subject, what would you say were the biggest challenges you faced now during the implementation of the continuous discovery framework in your team, and how did you overcome them? Let's start with you, Susan.
Thanks, Sarita, and thank you so much for that introduction to continuous discovery. I feel like I've also learned so much from it already as well, so that's great. So the biggest challenge I think we had to overcome is just overthinking it, being apprehensive about how to fit it in, not knowing what you don't know. In the end, I think the apprehension actually helped us to devise a systematic and strategic approach to putting the methodology into practice, and we were able to create a solid plan of action. In the end, we made time for adopting the continuous discovery framework because we believed in the approach, and the methodology was differentiated enough from our current practices in the way that would help us gain deeper understanding of our users. So we went ahead and created a realistic and achievable plan. We carved out time for it, and we executed against that plan. So we stayed committed to it. To help us create the plan, we first identified our goals. We discussed as a team what the process could look like with a view on the desired outcomes. So it was important to have an idea of what success looks like, as that helped us keep on track.
Interesting. Thank you for that. How about you, Kyle? Where were those challenges that you faced implementing this framework?
The tactical challenges come from recruiting, as you mentioned earlier. So that's why it's really nice to have a platform like Userlytics. And we use it to select people in and out of studies based on screeners and things like that. It's awesome for that. Thank you. And other challenges are, I alluded to this before, but getting people comfortable with the process of interviewing people themselves has been a challenge. And it's not because they don't want to, because when they're talking about their own product, potentially at the company or specifically at the company, they're super curious about it and they're invested in it. So, but again, if you say, hey, you're going to be talking with a stranger for 30 minutes and there are going to be 25 people observing, and who are your colleagues, that's daunting, right? For anybody, if you haven't done it before, particularly for junior PMs and things. So I've instituted for that program a light version where we'll get somebody, a Userlytics panelist, but it'll just be them and me and the person who's doing the interviewing. And that makes it a lot easier because you just need to break the ice and realize that it's just a conversation. And the way that these continuous discovery interviews go are, you're going to have, it said 1 to 2 questions. I always write down 4 to 6, I would say, and we kind of follow that. But it's what is the PM really interested in? What do you want to get out of this conversation? That's the conversation we had beforehand. And so, in 30 minutes you can meander and talk, and you're not in a huge rush, and they realize that it's fine. You're just having a conversation.
I love to hear how you've been changing a little bit as you have been doing this continuous interviewing. Has there any other unexpected learning or insight uncovered during that process?
Yeah, I'll just keep following, I guess. I actually. So when we do this live and we do have observers, I have everybody in a Fig Jam and they're taking notes. And one of the places in the Fig Jam that I have set aside is, did anything violate your intuitions? And I think that is, as a researcher, that's, they say it's not all great discoveries are highlighted with the word eureka. It's more like, huh, or that's interesting. And that's what that is. It's like, what surprised you? That's where the real insight comes from. And particularly, again, when you've got somebody who's a PO or a PM and they're the expert in their subject and something surprises them in an interview, that's the lightning that we're trying to capture there.
Great, thank you. Susan, you explained to us a little bit of that process that you took to implement the framework in your team. If you were starting over, what would you do differently, or if anything?
I think if we were starting over, we would try to be a bit more clearer about the outcomes that we want to achieve to better focus our interviewing and note-taking. To focus more on the wider behaviors and outcomes we want to influence. I feel like we lost sight of that over the course of time as we had a habit of being so we have a habit of being so laser focused on the point of conversion that sometimes it was difficult for us to stop trying to drive the conversation and how to make them convert more and just take a step back and have a wider conversation about the individual's journeys. In an ideal world, I think we would plan in reviews and revisit them periodically to remind ourselves of why we are adopting the continuous discovery approach in order to assess whether it's still appropriate to proceed with. And I think as part of the analysis process, we highlighted key opportunities in context of an overall customer journey, because we thought that this was a good way to help us frame ideas and surface opportunities at a journey level. I think we would want to explore this a bit more as part of the analysis process, as I believe it's a very compelling format for contextualizing and framing opportunities alongside opportunity tree.
Okay. And could you share maybe an example of how your team implemented continuous discovery in a real world scenario?
Yeah, definitely. So we decided to adopt the continuous discovery methodology to inform our understanding of the human needs that drive small business accounting and payroll prospects, because we sell finance software on our website. And what happens during their consideration stages of purchase decision making. So we decided to run bi-weekly interview sessions, 2 sessions every 2 weeks, basically, which entailed one-to-one depth interviews with representatives of the target audience. These typically lasted between 45 and 60 minutes. Initially, we planned for 30-minute sessions, but I think once we got going, we found that 30 minutes definitely wasn't long enough for a deep and purposeful conversation. Just like Kyle, we assigned roles and responsibilities to everyone involved in the process. Everyone who was observing had a designated role to play. So we had note takers, we had people responsible for recruitment, scheduling, and setting up the sessions on Userlytics, getting in touch with Userlytics to ensure the recruitment would take place smoothly. We even had someone in the team who was like a continuous discovery principal, who would provide any feedback on the way along the way about the methodology. Because we wanted to ensure that we were tracking back to the methodology as intended. After each research session, we organized group level debrief sessions to consolidate learnings and to create those one-page snapshots, which were super handy for socializing and talking about and drawing back on the learnings from each session. And so they were very, very easily to share with our stakeholders, and they provided a synopsis of what we learned in each of the sessions. And then after a period of time, we would get together as a project team to review the process, brainstorm ideas for improvement and actions, and create action plans for taking insights through to actions. And these would then be fed into our normal BAU delivery pipelines for implementation or further discussions.
Nice. It seems like you have everything set up. Are there any challenges that you still face or things that you think that you still need to improve?
Definitely, there's constant improvements along the way. To be honest, we're quite still early on in this methodology, and I think fitting it in is still a challenge for us. And just adapting our mindset to this idea of doing continuous interviewing, I think, is still a challenge for us.
Okay, great. So, Kyle, can you also share with us maybe how your team implemented the continuous discovery in a real world scenario?
Sure, yeah. And good point, Susan. 45 minutes is the sweet spot, I think, on these interviews. 30, you don't always have to go that long, but it's terrible to find yourself having a great conversation and then being at time, you know? So I'm with you. Yeah, recently, so here's a great example of continuous discovery at work. So um, I was working with an external team to develop an app, and I don't know who here does agency work or has worked with agencies, but it's a little bit of a different experience than doing things all in-house and having people right there. And we're developing an app, and we hadn't seen even screens of it for a while, and we finally got a prototype, and it was it was an app clip actually. So in the Apple Store, so it wasn't even a fully built out app. It was a semi-functional prototype, and we knew that we wanted to move really fast on this. So this is the time to start implementing continuous discovery work and doing things really iteratively. And so what we did was started interviewing people about what they saw in those app store screenshots, basically, or app shots, and then eventually into the app store screenshots and how they felt about it. Was the information right? Did it seem like a good hook? Was the value prop there? You know, all of those things. And that helped us to build better messaging, essentially, and better positioning leading into the actual app release. And so, you know, the engineers and the outside firm is building away, and we're collecting all this information on things that we're going to change before this thing launches, even though they're doing that. Then when the app actually does release, then we continue on with continuous discovery, asking people about the onboarding process. Does this make sense to you? Getting it in people's hands, you know, as a release, but still something that's not released to the public. One of the other neat things you could do on the App Store is actually gate things with a password so that people, you know, can download the app and play around, but they can't actually access the features until they enter the password in. So you can hold things off so you don't get a bunch of bad reviews if you're not fully baked yet, you know? So anyway, you get that in people's hands, they start playing. We realize that the onboarding process is actually really overly complex. And there are too many onboarding screens. It's trying to they were over-indexing on getting the value prop in front of people instead of just letting them use this. And then there were also some issues with importing contacts and some permissions issues that came along with iOS, you know, which is not a bad thing, but some usability, you know, security and usability often don't go hand in hand, right? And so what we realized was that we needed a wholesale redesign of the onboarding process. It needed to make it super quick, super streamlined, really easy to get in there and get using it. Because what was happening is that people were downloading it, they'd play around with it for a second, they would get a bit frustrated and then go meh. And if that happens, people are never coming back. You've lost them forever. And so we completely redesigned the onboarding process and put it in a new version, got that out, and that is now what's in the wild. And then we're continuing to do discovery on that at a weekly release rate. So they release every Friday. We try to get something, talk to some people, get some feedback, get that back to them by the next Wednesday so it can go into the next build or the build after, something like that. And it uncovers big showstoppers too, that you're like, this is, this is a P0 on your priority list of things because it really breaks the experience.
So I think that I can conclude that you find this framework really useful. But overall, what do you think? Why do you think continuous discovery is essential in a modern product development team?
Because it gives you have all this context because you're talking with people all the time. The information isn't coming out of nowhere. You're seeing how people that you're interviewing and that you're talking with, you're seeing how their response is differing based on the product that you have in front of them that's changing all the time. And it makes it very clear that the people we talked with last week or 2 weeks ago didn't understand what was going on. The people understand what is going on now. And if you can show that, or if you have a PM or a PO in the room, that's good. And I also say that I don't remember who came up with this thought, but it's that PMs particularly like need to see what no looks like, and engineers need to say what no looks like. So if they're in the room, they think that they've got the greatest idea ever made. A lot of us do. We put a lot of time into it and stuff, and they think, oh, everybody's going to like this. And you start putting it in front of people, and they're like, I don't get it. If I tell you that as a researcher with you, or a colleague tells you that, they're like, nah, you just don't get it. But when a random person tells you that, it means something much different. And it's important for people to hear what no actually sounds like.
Yeah. Susan, why do you think this is essential? Or how would you convince someone else that this is actually something that they need to apply in their team?
Yeah, I think the idea behind continuous discovery is an important concept for any user research to explore, as it provides a way for us to have continuous access and conversations with the customer. It's a methodology that is particularly effective for getting to the human need behind the experience that they see on the website. It appropriately uncovers the emotional experience and the human side to what is driving the individual who is in the process of making purchase decisions. Quite often when we're crafting online experiences, it can be quite difficult to put yourself into the emotional experience of that interaction. We felt that continuous discovery, because it's participant-led and it's interview-based, you're really trying to learn about those human aspects of their experience. Importantly, it helps us uncover the customer stories so that we get to know them better as people. And I think it's about staying in touch with our customers so that we remain in tune with their habits, and so that we are identifying behaviors and attitudes and trends over time, as opposed to trying to understand them at a particular point in time when we want to and when we need to.
So what would you say a team has to happen in a team in order for the need for continuous discovery to be triggered?
I think one of the reasons why I love being a user researcher is you often find gold when you have meaningful conversations, in particular, the types of conversations that are driven by curiosity in the person that you're speaking to. You want to find out what matters to them, getting to know them as a person. So for me and my team, we wanted to spend more time in that space, really getting to know our customers, our users, having in-depth conversations with the people to get to the root of their needs. And as well, at that time, my team had been on a journey to consolidate our research. So my team has been in place for 4 years, and we carry out a wealth of user research. We wanted to theme our research in a way that told the story of the users from their perspective, as another way to inject that empathy into the solution creation process to make sure that we were building the right thing, but also building it correctly. And I think speaking to the user needs is particularly powerful when we are thinking about crafting copy content and messaging that resonates with the end user. So together as a team, we agreed that the continuous discovery framework was the most suitable methodology to inform and validate our assumptions and to use it as a means to populate our user needs log.
Yeah, and obviously I agree as a researcher. I do think that keeping the customer first is always very important, but we know that working in a team where business is first, sometimes it's difficult to give these ideas that activities with the customers should be prioritized. So I was wondering, how does the continuous discovery help the team like balance that customer-centric focus, but also driving business value? What do you think, Kyle?
Again, that's a classic just scenario that's always going to exist, the business needs versus the research needs. I don't know. I came from academia, and that's where we could spend 2 years doing a project. That doesn't fly in industry, right? So I think one of the ways to really get this across is it depends on your company, depends on who they are. But if you're working closely with marketing, or if you're part of a marketing org, or even at the business org too, what you can do is generalize some of these findings by taking what you hear so over the course of let's say a week or a month or whatever, and turning it into a survey and putting some numbers around it and saying, we heard these things, XYZ violated our intuitions or whatever. We hypothesize these things. Survey 300 people, put some confidence intervals around things, maybe find some relationships, do some t-tests, whatever you need to do. But that really helps to generalize, because again, some people, one interview is not research, right? It's sort of research, but kind of, yeah. But you need really to generalize, you're going to need at least 10 of these things in a pretty short run about the same thing. So anyway, for a lot of people, the numbers really work well. So I encourage mixed methods wherever possible, of course, but I'm very biased.
What do you think, Susan? What shifts in the business, more like roles, are needed in order to adopt this continuous discovery approach?
I think one of the biggest shifts in mindset is moving from a project-based, time-bound, one-off research model to an ongoing one, an iterative approach, where user feedback is consistently integrated into the decision making. I think this shift highlights the importance of being flexible and responsive to new insights rather than waiting for large formal research reports to be delivered at the end of the traditional user research study. I think it helped us to be more lean in our execution and delivery of user research, which kind of helped to mitigate against that kind of speed versus kind of quality kind of consideration. And I think this type of approach encourages greater collaboration through the multidiscipline involvement in the research process, where designers, engineers, product marketers, or developers can join in the interviewing process. And I think this helps spark better shared understanding, which lends itself to a faster and more accurate translation of insights.
It's interesting that we're going back to that poll of the battle, no, between fast and quality. So what advice would you give the teams that are struggling to balance the discovery work, that are already applying this framework, with delivering deadlines, for example?
I think I would say don't treat discovery as a phase that only happens at the beginning or right before the delivery project is kicked off. I think try to treat it as a recurring part of the team's workflow. So it's a shift in mindset. And I think choose a interview cadence that is sympathetic to your team's availability, schedules, and capacity. The way that my team got started last year on it was we decided as a team of user researchers to set aside a small amount of dedicated time, a couple of hours a week, for the purpose of learning activities, new techniques, And this is how my team got started. And from the output of that work, we basically worked hard on socializing and evangelizing the outputs from the research. And we were able to track the research insights right through to action. And we were able to actually report on the revenue that was generated as part of the opportunities that came out of our research.
Okay. And how about you, Cal? What would you say then are the keys and recommendations to integrating continuous discovery into the product cycle without disrupting the ongoing development?
Yeah, someone has to own it. That's the big thing. You've got to have somebody dedicated or a team dedicated, but it's got to be on people's calendars. They have to be getting recognition for it. It's not one of those things like everything. You can't just say, it'd be nice if this happened. We hope you do it because it will just fall by the wayside. Um, at 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 1-800-Flowers, they've been wanting to do something like this for years, and the VP of UX and design and the SVP of product. The SVP of product was a startup founder, and went through a lot of acquisitions and was used to talking with hundreds of people a year. He was a big fan of this kind of methodology a lot, and then wasn't while he was at Flowers. That wasn't happening, and so he was a real advocate and champion for this. And then they had a few people. They had a junior UX person. Well, she was more of a marketing person whose job it was to kind of find out what people were doing before big holidays were coming up, what they were feeling, and things like that. So it kind of happened like quarterly. But then it became really clear that that wasn't enough, and so when I was there, it was we need to start doing this every week or every 2 weeks or whatever. You figure it out, and I was like, okay, fine, glad to figure it out. Just need to put that on my roadmap, know that I'm managing that, and then once you start getting people involved, particularly if it's a public thing, or they can observe and participate, it really becomes a community event, and people are excited about it, and they want to show up and they want to talk about it, and they buzz about it for the rest of the day into the next week usually. And I would make it my role to kind of monitor because everybody's on a chat together. They're all chatting about what they're hearing. They're taking notes, and it's really neat. People are excited for it. And then it would be part of my role too to then gather up everything that people had said and the notes and all that, synthesize that and report out. Boom, boom, boom. This is what we heard. This is where we're going next. This is why this matters, and so on.
Okay. And what would you say then are the minimum skills or knowledge that a product team needs to have in order to start implementing this framework?
You have to know how to craft decent interview questions, and basic interviewing skills, I would say, questions that aren't leading, that sort of thing. Again, you don't need to write a lot of questions for this, but you do need to understand, why do we want to talk with anybody at all? What's the goal here, as we've discussed before? Write some questions, and then for any interviewer who's just starting out too, just being quiet is the hardest thing. The silent probe, as we call it, where you want to fill the space. Everybody wants to fill the space. But if you do, the person you're interviewing will not. And what you want to do is sometimes almost make them nervous so they fill the space talking with you. Not in a bad way, of course, but it takes practice. And so you just have to get people in the room and doing it, and they build confidence. It's just like anything else.
Susan, and if we think back of those various activities that we saw that the continuous discovery framework requires, as the book called them, the habits that you have to start implementing, which one or which ones would you say have been the most critical for supporting your ongoing discovery within your team?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with Kyle there. Just having that interview approach and not being led by a test script or an interview script is quite a challenge. So establishing that kind of habit where you're genuinely just curious about the person that's sitting in front of you, that you're having a conversation with, and you're genuinely being led by the responses that they gave to just your initial question, and being led by that that line of conversation rather than asking them question after question and then kind of just answering all the questions on the list. And also for me and my team, I think the most critical habit was establishing that regular ongoing cadence of touch points with customers from the perspective of continuous learning. And the consistent engagement, I think, forms like the heartbeat of the continuous discovery process. And that's incredibly powerful when it comes to uncovering opportunities for innovation and building confidence that we need to pursue bigger, bolder ideas.
Okay. And actually, the book has one final section about metrics. What type of metrics do you use in your team to measure the continuous discovery success?
So we lean on the digital experimentation process to help us quantify research-led opportunities and outcomes. So we feed into quite a rigorous and robust A/B testing, optimization, personalization process. And so the metrics that we leverage quite often is we will define our value and the outcomes and return on investment through conversion uplift, revenue generation, as well as engagement metrics such as click rates, bounce rates, exposure rates, and attractiveness rates, which we gather through Content Square and Google Analytics. And additionally, we track improved digital satisfaction and increased quality of experience scores over time.
Okay. Kyle, I see you nodding to some of these metrics. Do you use this type of metrics as well to measure the success, or do you use otherwise?
Yeah, all of those. And then in addition, there's we always try to root, or not always try, we do or at Flowers, and same thing at Meta too. Every PRD requirement document, was rooted in a user problem. And it said right up front, and at Meta they call these people problems, which is, I love it. I like the term people in general. That's the term that I use. We're talking about people. And so every PRD starts out with, what problem are you solving for people? Which is different from a problem statement. And not always 100% applicable, but so we really try to develop metrics that get at that, which is really tricky because some of them are derived, and you use like bounce rate to proxy and conversion to obviously get your conversion rates, and a billion other metrics, but you can easily have analysis paralysis too. And so it's often best to, if you can, and if you have bandwidth, to partner with DS and derive a metric that makes sense and iterate on that over time. It's an art and a skill for sure for them to come up with this stuff. But if you can measure the behavior on site, then you can often derive a metric.
And how would you say then that continuous discovery has also improved your team's decision making in the product development process?
I'll go back to something I said earlier. If I'm working in a continuous discovery environment and you learn that something isn't going to work, or something works better in a different way. Again, it's not me saying it. This is empirical evidence, and this is what I have, right? And this is why it just gives you have to have kind of thick skin as a researcher sometimes, because people can get annoyed with you for bringing these things up, but you just have to remind them to, back up and go through the experience yourself again. Try to have fresh eyes on it, as these people were. And more often than not, they will come back to you and go like, oh yeah, we have a problem.
Definitely. So I wanted to finish asking you both, how has Userlytics helped you to implement this continuous discovery framework?
For us, we leaned on Userlytics, our trusted partner, as the platform for carrying out the continuous discovery sessions. And we also relied on Userlytics for the recruitment, as we knew from experience that we could count on Userlytics to fulfill the quotas quickly and on a prolonged regular basis as well. You guys help us out so much in our recruitments, and the special ops recruitment service is so invaluable to us. Without it, I don't think we would, have a smooth user research session, as many of those as we would. So Userlytics have been an invaluable operational partner throughout for us. So thank you so much for everyone that we've worked with at Userlytics, Sarita.
Amazing. Thank you, Susan. How about you, Kyle? What are the benefits of using Userlytics for implementing this continuous discovery framework?
Yeah, recruitment again, it's amazing. And you can find you can I've never not found the right person, or somebody that I was trying to find with Userlytics, which is awesome. Number one. And number two, one of the things I really like about Userlytics participants is it's not their first rodeo doing user research at all. So they're not coming in completely cold, and you can ask them anything basically, that within your research scope. And you can ask them to something we do live all the time is they ask them to share their screen and go to Google and search for whatever you want, whatever your product is, search for flowers, search for steel beams, search for whatever, and you can watch their entire flow live, which is really cool. And that's all recorded too. And then the third thing quickly for this process, particularly for the larger one that I do with the PMs and things, is that they're blind observers. And people on Userlytics who are interviewing know that they may be observed, but it's not like a Zoom call where they see that there are 25 people in the background, which would be incredibly intimidating, and your results would be way different, much different. And so the blind observer link is huge.
Amazing. Well, precisely, we wanted to share with the rest of the audience a little bit of how Userlytics offers different services for them to also apply this framework in their teams. And even though obviously our core is offering the platform, we also have, as Susan mentioned, our operations team, our UXC team that can also help you with the implementation. And we wanted to show you a little bit of those things that we could actually help for this transition to go a little bit smoother regarding all of the challenges that Susan and Kyle also mentioned. But because we go beyond the usability, we also want our clients to see ourselves as a partner, not only in the usability testing phase, but way before that. And because of this, we want also to help in those continuous interviewing, in those conversations that you have weekly with your customers, and that throughout all of the opportunity tree spaces, you can count on us to provide you with the services that you might need. And in the platform, you obviously can conduct those unstructured weekly interviews with your clients and gather all the necessary information to build and refine your opportunity tree constantly. And as the book suggests, automate the recruitment process precisely with the Userlytics panel, as Susan and Kyle mentioned. But also, for example, as speaking for myself, obviously the framework does remark that it is the product team that should be the ones doing this continuous interviewing. But if there's any sessions that you cannot carry out, to not lose that user, not lose that slot that you already have programmed on your schedule, the different members of our UX consulting team, like myself, can help you moderate those sessions so that that week participant is still interviewed and that the information keeps on flowing continuously. We can also provide you with that interview snapshot so that you can also gather it with the rest of the information that you must have and get the most important data of the interview that we carry out for you. And obviously, you will also have the recording in your Userlytics account in order to check it out later. So going on to pricing, I'll leave Nate for giving you all of the details.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sarita. And Susan and Kyle as well. So much good information. Maybe you're sitting in the webinar now and you're like, I love the things that Susan and Kyle have implemented in their teams. I want to do this on my team. Maybe you're not really sure where to start. As Sarita mentioned, Userlytics is here to help, not only on the recruitment front, but we can also help you get started in the process. And so Sarita and her consulting team can basically start this process for you. You know, you're able to sit in as observers and see how they do it, you know, connect with the researchers. Why did you ask this or that question? So it's a great learning, potentially even a training experience, and helps you get that feet off the ground, or you know, maybe you just want to outsource it totally. So we have some numbers here. Again, we are going to provide these slides afterwards, so I don't need to go through each specific number. But you know, 8-week process or a 16-week process where we're able to handhold as much as you want through building that process and moderating those sessions for you. And then Sarita, on the next slide, we do have an offer since, you know, we're so thankful that you joined us here on the webinar today. So we do have a little offer for you, specifically on the recruitment front. If you're interested in getting things started, right? The most important step is the first one and starting to do it. So we have an easy way to do that, 2-week free trial where we'll provide 2 participants per week to get you off the ground. No cost associated with that. And that is specifically on the recruitment front. But that is our offer to you. So we'll, of course, be reaching out afterwards to everyone who attended or registered with the slides, with the recording, and of course this offer as well if you want to get started on that. But I know the moment that everyone's been waiting for, a little live Q&A. We have about 30 minutes left, so really want to dig into some of these questions. I think great questions so far, and ones that the team are really going to be able to answer. So let's go ahead and jump in on them. I'll just kind of read one out. I'll maybe toss it to one of the different speakers, or maybe we'll just do a round robin. But one of the first ones, which came early on, was how do you balance the need to explore a wide range of ideas with the pressure to move fast and deliver quickly? So this is kind of related to that poll we talked about. Susan, I thought you might be a good one to answer this. You kind of already touched on it. So again, how do you balance the need between to explore a wide range of ideas with the pressure to move both fast and deliver quickly?
I definitely think it's about adopting that team sport mentality, getting everyone involved, making sure that everyone's taking part in the sessions, doing their bit, capturing notes. Encourage everyone to obviously sit in and observe the sessions, take notes firsthand. So what we did was straight after the sessions, we would follow up with like a 30-minute debrief. And that 30-minute debrief was super powerful and important for aligning everyone on the key takeaways and the next step actions. And then also turning around that the one-page snapshot is super powerful as well. But also reminding yourself that, you know, even though you're generating this one pager as your key deliverable, the data is not lost because it's all captured there in your Canvas, whatever platform you use to capture that, whether it was a notepad or in Miro or in Figma Jam. All of the information is there, but also the power of leveraging Userlytics. Nothing is lost. So even though you don't get time to write up like a 40-page report, you can always go back and watch back the insights on the platform. All the sessions are recorded, transcripts are available. You can search through the transcripts. You even have sentiment analysis incorporated into the transcripts as part of Userlytics platform, and you even have AI generated summaries as well. So definitely leveraging the power of the Userlytics platform supports us in being able to work in lean ways and just not being afraid to create snapshot outputs as part of your user research, I think.
Yeah, I love that. Follow-up question for you, Susan, on those debrief sessions. I think that's a great idea. I'm wondering, you know, you had mentioned a principle, a continuous discovery principle, and that was actually another question. But I guess the question maybe that I have that kind of relates to this is that debrief session, is that led by someone on the team, maybe the principal, or is it more of just an open table discussion? Interested on your thoughts on that.
So typically it's led by the user researcher, and we invite everyone to share top of head insights that they thought really stood out to them. And that helps us understand what really stood out to people. And that kind of helps indicate some priorities as well. And then as part of understanding those priorities, a user researcher can basically kind of guide the discussions around that and really honing in on the underlying needs without kind of jumping into solutions. Because the point about aligning on the insights is that we help the the team to understand there's a variety of solutions that can come about from one insight. So I think definitely it's a case of the user researcher leads the debrief session in order to guide the discussions and keep everyone on track so that the discussion isn't going to be taken off in one particular direction without being able to address like the full view of insights that have come out of the sessions.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's a great tip for those, again, trying to build this practice into their own research team, right? We're not just running the sessions and forgetting about them, right? Hopefully it's more of the situation like Kyle mentioned where everyone's still buzzing about that session through the following days. Kyle, I had another question I thought might be a good one for you. A kind of a short one, but necessary. The question was, should you recruit different users each time, or should you repeatedly interview the same small group? Kind of talk to us about the difference of recurring sessions with similar participants, or should I be finding a new person each time?
Yeah, it really depends on the product that you're working on, I would say. If there are times when doing these long-term recurring studies where you're growing with the person you're interviewing or with the group you're interviewing, it can be really, really insightful because again, you see change. But I'm more of a snapshot person, I would say, in general, where I like to get in front of people for the first time, try to craft my questions and do the research in a way that is meaningful in this instance. And that could be with, potentially a focus group or a group of people or whatever. But I like those snapshots a lot because there's a diversity of opinion that you get there, that I find really valuable. And you'll get two people in the same room who just have diametrically opposed use cases. And that's always the best, because it's really insightful. So.
Yeah, I love that. And Sarita, the next one's for you. Again, it's going to be a little bit similar to this last question, but maybe more on the internal team side. And I know that you kind of broke down the opportunity tree. So the question was, how do cross-functional teams, and the example they gave was product, design, and engineering, collaborate across the different levels of the opportunity tree without jumping straight to the solution? So a good one for you, Sarita, as I know you already kind of broke this down.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the questions there that we mentioned was asking yourself if that opportunity has multiple solutions, because an opportunity, as the book describes it, is more of the actual need, desire, or the pain point of the user, and not actually something that is defined in your product, in your website, or in your business. You have to see it in a customer-centric way. If it's not built like that, you are talking about a solution. So obviously it is very natural in us, and especially when we are working towards a solution, to jump into that solution. But what we need to go back is to, again, as Kyle mentioned it, we're talking to people. We are discussing with them what are their needs in a general overview. So if your business is about purchasing software like Susan does, go back and see what are the challenges that these business owners are having way before actually purchasing that software. What is that is troubling them, so that you can talk to them as people, not as the customers of your product. So when you go back into seeing those needs, those pains that people has as people and not as users of your product, then you can get into those opportunities and not into those solutions.
That's really helpful, Sarita. Thank you so much for that. I know we got a few more questions, so I want to try to tackle as many as we can with the time we have left. I want to leave this one open to the group because just kind of interested to see what you all think about it. Good question from Marcus here. He's looking for inspiration on using continuous discovery for developing the business itself. So not specific to maybe the product, which I know we focused a lot on so far. Does anyone have any experiences or tips on developing continuous discovery, or I should say using continuous discovery for developing the business?
I'm interested to hear, does that mean internal processes within the business, or I don't, Marcus, if you could answer in the chat, culture in the business, what about the business exactly?
Well, Marcus answers, I think that basically continuous discovery is always talking to your customers. But at the end, if, as Kyle is mentioning, is something internal like building corporate culture, at the end is talking to your employees, or if you're building the business, well, then again, you need to talk to your customers or potential customers or those audiences that you're going to eventually have to address. So I would say that this is even before just product development, but also business development, because at the end, as we saw in that definition of discovery, we're trying to tackle an idea. We're trying to see if this idea is something that is valuable for people again. So I would say that it is very parallel, and it can be also used as business if you talk to the audience of that business, whichever it is.
Yeah, and I think it's about focusing on the outcome, knowing what you want to achieve out of adopting the continuous discovery framework, and just get started. Just start talking to people and start learning. Yeah, just get started, I think.
I've actually, okay, now that I see it's about process and people and things. So I've done a lot of internal research, and it's not much different than external research. You've got people in, like, let's say you're building dashboards or building processes. A lot of UX researchers work on process, and because we're trained to see inefficiencies in processes and things like that by talking with people who use those tools every day. So a great way is to I really like ops managers and ops people, because they can put me in touch with people who are doing the work on the ground, usually every day. And so who you have to it really depends on your industry, but I mean, you have to get down to the warehouse and see how people are doing things there, and you have to then go to the distributor, and then you have to really take a bird's eye look at all this stuff and be engaging with people at every level, to be able to understand what's going on and really understand your employees on the ground. And I once did a project and wrote I called employees I called them trend vampires, because they are, and you should listen to them, because they're dealing with your customers every day, and they're doing a lot of research for you. And if you can incorporate what they're saying and what they're hearing and do it in a meaningful way, you not only will build better products for the people who are coming into your business, but you will make your employees feel much better about themselves too, when they see the things that bother them every day or that are great for them every day be reinforced.
Yeah, and a great question, Marcus. I appreciate you giving us a little follow-up on that as well. I think it's a good question because it kind of expanded our view a little bit, right? Because maybe we were focusing a little bit on, external people and product related. So I think it's a good way to show that continuous discovery has a lot of different avenues that you can approach with it in the strategy. We'll keep it moving here. Again, a lot of good questions here. One that that I want to, maybe Susan, you could give us some insight on this. The question is, how do you manage leadership decision makers who observe a session and want to take action when it might not be representative of the broader user base? Great question here, Susan. Interested to see what you think.
I would kind of challenge their recommendation, as I have done, as I do, and take it back to why they're suggesting that solution and why they think it's the best action to take based on the insights. So I would just take it back a step and focus it back on the insights and ask them the question of whether or not challenge them to think if the solution that they propose is actually answering the user problem that has been identified in the sessions.
Yeah, I love that answer. Kyle, interested to see what you think as well. Maybe have any or had an experience with someone
Oh
on the
yeah.
team getting a little gung ho.
Yeah, this happens. And again, it's well intentioned typically. If people are excited about the research, if they've this is what I was talking about earlier, like why I have processes in place for generalizability and making things more broadly applicable, or understandable, because you'll see in one interview conducted by a PM or something like that, people will say one thing, 2 weeks later, people will say another thing, potentially oppositional, but they're two different customers, so that's fine. Um, but one person only attended this interview, one person only attended this interview, so they walk away thinking, oh, people think that. And I think a line in the sand to establish is there, there's research and then there's capital R research, or like just like there's cap D design, like that actual design is different from the colloquial way we use it. So yeah, I mean, technically that was research, but it was not signed off by research. We're not making huge decisions based on this yet. And so that's where, like I said before, you can do a survey or you can do a rapid follow-up with a panel and then, interview 10 people, and if 10 out of 10 say the same thing, then you've probably hit saturation and you're probably right. But until then, um, yeah, you've got to be a little careful.
Yeah, I want to jump in there because one of the slides that I showed, it was very specific on the experimental space to have criteria that you're going to take for testing an assumption. And this, I think, also applies to research in general, not only in continuous discovery, but is to inform the team, especially those that are going to attend the sessions, of what the whole research is about. So as Kyle was mentioning, people might join one and not another. So they're going to have ideas that are going to be different if they only watch one. But if they are aware of the fact that this is a research that involves 10 users, or that this is part of continuous discovery and that we're gathering information continuously, they are not going to go directly into saying, hey, we need to do this because one person said it. So I think it's also of trying to evangelize a little bit the research, how it's done. And I think that this is not only something that appeared now with continuous discovery, but in general with research, we have always struggled with people joining one session and not knowing the whole context of it. So it's just trying to inform people about what the research is about, what is the overall objectives, what is the overall methodology that you're using the sample, so that they are aware, like, hey, I'm joining this session, but again, as a silent observer, and eventually I'll get all the information of the general research that is done.
And
Yeah, I
also,
completely.
sorry, just to add to
Go
that
ahead.
as well, I also think that it's okay if people suggest solutions, and if we can't get them to back down, what we can do is, because we know we're going to be speaking to customers on an ongoing basis, what we can do is just materialize that idea and put it back into the interview process. Because, continuous discovery isn't just about talking to people, it can encompass a broader range of activities as well, such as concept testing and experimenting with solutions. And I think this framework gives you that perfect framework in order to bring things back to the customers, validate, and then use the data and insights to push back on those solutions as well.
Yeah, really, a really valuable point. I appreciate that, Susan. I think it's a good reminder that it is a framework and not like a solidified, stuck in concrete process. So a good call out there. A question for both Susan and Kyle that was in the QA. One of the attendees is curious how many researchers the guests, both you, Susan and Kyle, have on your team. And what is the balance in team time spent on continuous discovery versus other research, right? So what's the allocation to this versus all the other things you have to do?
Yeah, so I guess I'll continue. I have a team of 5 user researchers, and like I said earlier on in the session, I know you were late, so you might not have heard me say it, but what we do in my team is we carve out dedicated time in our week. Typically, it's like a Friday afternoon where we block out our time for learning development. And because at that time, as a team, we decided that continuous discovery was a methodology that would be particularly valuable for us in our interests and what we were trying to do in consolidating kind of the user needs and human aspects of the buyer's journey. We decided to use that development time to take part and implement this continuous discovery process, so that it actually didn't have too much of a material impact on our BAU work commitments and capacity.
And then so at my last company at 1-800-Flowers, that is a very a highly matrixed organization, as they would call it, but you might say fragmented too. There are a lot of different orgs in different places. And there were many people who did research adjacent things, but were not necessarily titled UX researchers. And we had people talking with customers a lot. We have had a lot of people running surveys and doing those. So I didn't have a team of researchers necessarily, but I did have a weekly R&D meeting that I led that was there were 8 attendees, 8 to 10 attendees, really, and I would carve out for continuous discovery work with PMs and things like that. Those were every 2 weeks. We would hold those sessions, and I would carve out same thing as Susan, a half an hour after each interview, and the interviews are 45 minutes optimally. But then to onboard the person doing the interview, I would have a 30-minute interview or 30-minute discussion with them. And we would do those high-level questions. What are you thinking about? What problem do you want to solve? Who do you want to talk with, et cetera? Just the basics. And then kind of get them prepped for what this might look like. Get a few thoughts down on paper as what a discussion guide would look like. And then I would set up a mock interview with them the week after to get them comfortable with not only the Userlytics software, and because it is a little bit different than a normal Zoom call or something like that, but get them accustomed to that, and then run them through the interview, particularly if they hadn't done one before, had never interviewed a customer before, to get the weeds out. So for me, just a few hours a week, and for the participant or for the person on my team who was interviewing, just a couple hours. But then there was a cycle on there were 20 product managers about, so they're doing it once or twice a year, so not a lot. They could do it more if they wanted to. And then at Meta, like I was part of a team of 90, so it was big, and that was just like a little sliver there, 5,000 or 6,000 researchers at Meta. So the discovery there was less continuous, I would say, that we did. But when it was, and yes, but it was very event based, the work that I was doing. So if there was something, I worked on elections, I worked in the civic integrity space there. So if there was an election coming up in Nigeria, then we would hit the pavement talking with people more often to see what was going on and really validate what we thought was at risk in the country.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we actually have you both, right, Susan and Kyle, because a great contrast in experiences using this framework and contrast in corporate structure and things like that. So I love that we kind of have different experiences and thoughts on those. We only have a few minutes left, so going to speed run some of these last questions, but want to get to them. Sarita, I'm going to throw this one at you. The question is, how would you address stakeholder skepticism on research and ideation before solutioning? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, I would think that in general, with continuous discovery, as with any other research, a skepticism of the results that research can bring to a company, to a product, are always going to be faced. So I would only show like results. Basically, that is what, and as Kyle mentioned throughout our conversation today, showing them numbers sometimes makes the trick, but also showing them the impact that this kind of activities can have on not only on the actual ROIs, because that is important, numbers are important, but also on the experience on if they do a trial, like for example, the one that we are showing, and just showing how people really care about the companies and the brands, caring of their needs, of their pain points, of actually their experience that they have with the product, and seeing that evolution of a user experience being improved by the research, by this continuous discovery, seeing also the impact that it has internally, as we discussed with Kyle and Susan, of how easier is it to take decisions, and good decisions, strategic decisions, with applying this type of frameworks inside the team. That is when you're going to start changing the mindsets of those that are skeptical.
I love that, Sarita, and really thorough on that answer. I appreciate that. Let's move on to the next one. We got 2 left. Susan, I'll throw this one over to you. How would you recommend getting continuous discovery pre-decision making compared to stakeholders making decisions and then using quote unquote research to validate their decisions? It's a little bit of a dense question, but interested in your thoughts.
For us, that's easy. That's our user needs repository. So we consolidated all of our findings and we made sure that it was available and accessible to our stakeholders so that they could self-serve on this repository of user needs, which is based on the human aspects, the human side of things that we've uncovered as part of our continuous discovery conversations. So the continuous discovery is the vehicle with which we use to gather that insights, but we also use that to populate our user needs repository, which we use as a means to also communicate with our stakeholders so that really they don't have any reason now to not base their solutions and ideas on actual user needs. And so then that's what we decided to implement to move away from user research just being a validatory tool, but it would be the thing that actually inspires outcomes and experiences for our customers.
Thanks so much, Susan. Last question here, Kyle, I'm going to throw it your way. What are different methods that we can research our customers and get non-biased data? A little bit of a general question. Interested to hear your thoughts, Kyle.
The question of bias is my other researchers are smiling because there's always going to be bias, and that's a tough one. So you have to rely on things like larger sample sizes or interviewing enough people to make sure that you hit. I mentioned saturation earlier. So usually, if you interview 15 or 20 people, you're going to hear every problem that people have had about a narrow enough discussion, service, product, whatever. And so, yeah, bias is tough. You have to write the proper questions. When I'm interviewing people on Userlytics, I never tell them what company I work for, because I know that people like people to like them, and so they'll tell you the answers they think you want to hear if they think you work for XYZ company. So we never do that. I mean, there are a lot of books on methodology that talk about this problem, and so I'm not gonna be able to attempt it here, really. Google it, how to minimize bias in whatever method that you have. But I will say too, triangulation. So again, mixed methods guy, use several different methods, and if they all point the same direction, you're probably right. And recognize that if you're working in industry, what you really need is the direction. That's what we're looking for most of the time is directional information. We're not necessarily trying to, we're not trying to publish an article in a journal. We're trying to get information that helps people make decisions and make better products that are rooted in the empirical user experience.
I think a great response, Kyle. I know that was kind of a broad one, but I think a great response. And as we wrap up here today, again, just want to thank each of you for joining. I guess last thoughts as we go, and maybe it's for those who are, again, still with us. Appreciate everyone staying till the end. Susan, I'll start with you again. We'll go with each of you. I just want to hear maybe like one piece of advice or tip for someone who is going to begin building the continuous discovery framework into their team. What's kind of one good get off the ground tip that you could share?
I think I've mentioned it before, but it's just do it. Just if you believe in it as a methodology and you think it's going to help you achieve the outcomes that you're focused on achieving, then just get started. Reach out to Userlytics, get them to support you, anything you need to just get going, and then it just becomes a habit.
Kyle, what's one?
I agree 100%. Just habitualize it and get going, and start doing it every Friday afternoon or something like that. That's when I schedule mine usually because it's a nice way to end the week. And yeah, do it.
Amazing. Sarita?
Just that if you're doing it, please do it and count on us to help you with it.
Amazing. And the one I'll give will be to reach out to Userlytics and get your free 2-week trial so that you don't have to pay for the first couple ones that come in. But thank you everyone for joining. I hope this was an insightful webinar for you. We'll be reaching out soon and be in touch. And until then, hope you have a great rest of your week into the weekend.
Analytics tells you what. Userlytics tells you why.